Hi guys, and welcome to another video in the series of Python GUI development tutorials. My name is Bo Milanovic, and this is the video everyone has been waiting for so long. We're done with our code, and the next natural step for us would be to convert our application to a distributable binary file. In other words, translated to English, that means convert our .py files and our entire application into .exe or .executable file. And since I'll be working on Windows in this case, I'll be running as a virtual machine under Linux. Still, since I'll be working in Windows, I'm only going to convert it to .exe, but a very similar process can be applied to converting it to Linux binaries as well as macOS binaries. You can see that the PyCharm is closed, and we're probably not going to be using PyCharm in this video. What I'm going to be using is first the browser. I've opened up Opera right here, and normally when you Google how to convert a Python application to an executable file, in various web forums and Stack Overflow for the most part as well, you get the first suggestion usually is Py2.exe. And Py2.exe or Py2executable is what basically its goal is to achieve exactly what we want. It says extension which converts Python scripts into executable Windows programs able to run without requiring a Python installation. And this is our goal. This is what we want. We don't want the user to have to download Python. We don't want the user to have to download all those libraries that we have imported like PySide or PyQt. We want the user to just double-click the application and run it the same way we run it from PyCharm or whatever editor you're using by clicking to run. We want that end result. However, my success, and from what I heard about the others as well, is with Py2.exe, when it comes to PySide or PyQt applications, was very, very, very limited. Actually, I was not able to get it working at all. I've heard that people were able to get it working by heavily modifying the configuration file that the Py2.exe uses, but there is a different way. Now, the second suggestion you might get is cxfreeze, which basically does a very similar thing. So if I or the same thing practically. If I open the website, it says a set of scripts and modules for freezing Python scripts into executables in much of the same way that Py2.exe and Py2app do. I believe Py2app is for macOS. And it's cross-platform, so that's cool. But just as if with Py2.exe, I've had very limited success with cxfreeze as well. So, I'm going to close this, and I've encountered this problem before, so you're not alone. How do I convert an application that has lots of lines of code, and not only that, it imports various modules, including PyQt and PySide? How do I convert it to an executable? And it turns out it's very simple, but we're not going to be using Py2.exe or cxfreeze at all. We're going to be using something called PyInstaller. PyInstaller also does the same thing Py2.exe and cxfreeze do. They convert the stuff to an executable file. It's maintained, as the time of recording this video, the current version is 2.1, and it's actively maintained, so that's a very good news. When you have open source software, that's not necessarily true, but and the documentation is fantastic. So you can see here the main goal of PyInstaller is to be compatible with third-party packages out of the box. And when you keep on reading, it says, as an example, libraries like PyQt, Django, and Matplotlib are fully supported without having to handle plugins or external data files manually. I have written a Python application that uses Qt as its GUI and other stuff that come from Qt as well, that imports about, I'd say, 30 or 40 modules, and PyInstaller handle it perfectly fine. There are two different ways you can install PyInstaller. One is through using pip, the Python manager for handling stuff from PyPy, or easy install, whichever you prefer. I've switched recently from easy install to pip. I think it's more actively maintained. But there's also, you can download this archive file, and you can use the standard Python setup.py Python setup.py install method of installing the PyInstaller. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to install it via pip. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to click the documentation for version 2.1 link, and I'm going to open as HTML. And the documentation is very extensive, so that's fantastic. And one of the things it has right here is installing PyInstaller. You can see right here it says that the recommended method for Windows, Linux, or macOS is to use the standard pip install PyInstaller. For Windows, PyWin32 is a prerequisite. Now, this is also very simple to install. I'm not sure if pip installs that automatically, but just in case it doesn't, I'm going to open this link and I'm going to show you what to download. So, oh look, it has been maintained recently. That's great. Last time I was here, this was maintained ages ago. So you're gonna get to the SourceForge page, and just click on this only folder you have right here. You can see this is the build that I have. That's very old, but apparently there's a newer build. That's fantastic. Good news. So in this case, you click build 219, and the thing you need to do is find what Windows, whether you have, first you need to know whether you have 32-bit or 64-bit Python installed. So if you have 32-bit, and I have 32-bit, Python 2.7, this is what you need. It says right here, Windows 32, Python 2.7. This is not your Windows architecture. Your Windows may be 64-bit, and probably is in this day and age, but your Python, what you've downloaded the Python as. Now, I remember on the old Python website there was a nice choice, but I think they've redesigned fairly recently. I'm not sure if they have the same thing now. You have Windows, but if you click, I'm honestly not sure now. On this new website, I know there used to be you can pick whether you want 64-bit or 32-bit installation. I generally opted for the 32-bit installation. If you have, however, downloaded the 64-bit Python, you need this one in case you're working with Python 2.7. You can basically, conclude based on the number of downloads. See, Python 2.7 is still the most popular one, and the 32-bit version of it is, again, the most popular one. If you're using Python 3 point something, just find the right version. That's the important part. And if it fails, if the installation of it fails, you probably didn't find the right version. So, this is an installation wizard, so it'll guide you through the installation process. Okay, once you have PyWin32 installed, go back to the PyInstaller documentation and install PyInstaller, of course. And the way I did that is through pip, like I mentioned earlier. So let me still show you how I did it. So I went to the start menu and I typed PowerShell. Now PowerShell is similar to command prompt in Windows. I just prefer it because it has more commands. It's more similar to Bash in Linux, which I primarily use, my primary operating system. And if you just type PowerShell, it should pop right up. If not, you have the option of either installing PowerShell, or you can do all this that I'm about to do in a command prompt as well, but I just prefer PowerShell. Now, the important thing to do here is to right-click on it and hit the Run as Administrator. So you have to run as administrator in order to use pip in general, especially if you're in Windows 8. Here's the thing. The way to install PyInstaller using pip is as simple as the documentation says, pip install PyInstaller. I'm not going to hit the return or enter key right now because I already have it installed. But this is what you do, and then it's going to live in the folder where all your other third-party modules live, which is that site packages folder in the Python installation directory. In fact, let me open that folder right now. This is my site packages, and I can simply double-click the PyInstaller 2.1, and again, you don't need that. I mean, you don't need it for this video. If you click PyInstaller, you can see all this stuff here. That's the module. Now, we're not importing this anywhere. We're not writing code anymore. So that's, well, in a way, that's good news, right? What I would advise you to do is to read this whole page. It's not terribly long, but it's very useful, and it's very simple to understand and how it works exactly. And what you may need to do, however, after installing PyInstaller is reboot your computer, because you need to add the PyInstaller to the path. It says right here, verifying the installation. And if I type this, I'm just going to copy it, and in order to paste in PowerShell, just right-click. You don't have to do anything, just right-click. And it says right here 2.1, so it works. If it says the command not found, make sure the execution path includes the proper directory. It explains everything right here. You see that you have to add this to the path, and to display the current path in Windows, do this, and for other systems like Linux and macOS, do that. So I'm not going to deal with that. I'm going to scroll down. I'm not going to read this. I've read it a long time ago, and I think it has changed a whole lot. But I'm going to scroll down and find. This is what we basically need. These options. You have the general options. You have the options for finding important modules, libraries, options for the executable output. Okay, so you can see right here that I have PyInstaller in my path, and what that means basically is that I can run it as a command from whatever folder I am. This PyInstaller doesn't have to be located in this case, simulator folder. So right now what I'm going to do, excuse me, I'm going to go back to PyDataMan, and this lives in a network mount. In this case, this is not really a network mount. It's the way VirtualBox handles host drive systems, but it's assigned a G as a partition letter. So here's a neat little trick I've accidentally learned, and maybe not all Windows users know it. If you click on this folder icon right here, it's going to give you a nicely formatted text path that you can copy, which is what I'm going to do. And why don't I start Notepad? I'm going to paste this in a notepad just so that I have it. But I'm also going to add another backslash and say main.py. And this main.py is the main file that we've been working with so far. If you didn't name it main, make sure it matches whatever file name you have. So I'll minimize this for now. And again, using PyInstaller is incredibly simple. You won't even believe it. You will probably wonder, why did I not know this before? Okay, so what do we do here? I'm going to scroll even more a little bit, and this is basically what we are most interested in for now. You have the options for executable output, and I'm going to explain each one of these, although there's a very good explanation right here as well. You have the name option, or a name parameter, is what I put it as generally the name of the application, which in our case will be PyDataMan, which makes sense. You have the -d or one director. You create a folder name containing executable name, which is this. And also port files, this is the default setting, so you don't have to pass this. Create a single executable file name, or name.exe or name.app, which is again this name. By default, PyInstaller is not going to create one single executable file. Instead, it's going to have a huge list of like files and folders, and that's going to contain all those different libraries and the Python modules that we're importing, which is fine. Sometimes you want to keep that, sometimes you don't care, sometimes you don't care if the user cares and all that, but I prefer to have it kind of all in one file, which is easier for me to handle, especially you'll see in the next video when we're building our installation wizard. So you know, this is I guess just easier way to do it. So the way this works in one file later on, from a technical point of view, executable file is basically nothing more than an archive. You can practically open some executable files in an archive editor. Some of them you can open it in Notepad and all that. So this is what it does basically, and once you run the application, it extracts all those stuff I mentioned, you know, all those modules and libraries, to a temporary directory on the user's machine, which is erased when the user closes the application. So it's practically the same thing, except in this case, when you pass the one file parameter, it won't generate all that, but all those files, but it will going to pack them in one executable file. And when the user double clicks the application, it'll have the you know, the user won't know because he or she probably won't look into the temporary directory. Not that it matters at all. Now, here you can pass the -c parameter. It says set up a console subsystem for standard input output, and this is the default for both one file and one folder modes. Normally, when you're writing a Python application, for some reason people think that it's generally a scripting language and that it's not very often used as a GUI programming language. So the default behavior right here is that even if you do have a GUI programming language, I mean, if you have a GUI application, it's still going to spawn the command prompt on Windows, the console, and it's going to run the application as well. But we don't want the console, we don't want the command prompt. Why do we need that? Our application is GUI only. That's why we have this, the -w or -window. Do not create a console in Windows and macOS at runtime for standard input output. So in this case, we would only have the you know, the GUI that we have designed, that we have all fallen in love with. I'm not going to explain the other ones, but you can read the documentation. You can see here there's a way to add a manifest file if you need it. There's a way to add an icon. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with PyInstaller. So how do we finally use it? How do we convert it? I'm going to go back to my PowerShell. Actually, let me open Notepad real quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all this and hit copy. So since, again, PyInstaller is in my path, I can just type PyInstaller, hit the tab, and it's going to doesn't matter, you can just type in PyInstaller, and then I'm going to pass this one_dir parameter, even though it's a default. You know, I kind of sometimes like to pass the default parameters as well. One_dir, I'm going to pass one file as well, and I'm going to say name equals PyDataMan. I'm going to pass the windowed so that we only have the GUI. I'm going to open my quotation marks right now and then right click right here so that I paste the file name, our main file name, that, you know, copied from the notepad, and that's the path to our file. I'm going to close the quotation marks. I don't think quotation marks are necessary in this case, but if you have a space in the folder or file name or some other strange characters that the console doesn't really like, it's a good idea to put it in quotation marks. Now what I need to do is hit enter. And the PyInstaller does its thing, and you wait a little bit. And you have all this output, and it says, look at this beautiful app, pending archive to an executable, C user simulator dist PyDataMan. And if I go to C, let me hit run, C user simulator, and I find the dist folder, which will take some time, I guess. There we go. There's PyDataMan.executable. This PyDataMan file name comes from that -- name parameter we passed. And if I double click this, look at this. It works. It lives. And there's no Python. There's nothing. You can uninstall Python right now and this will work. You can see there's two rows right here, and I've modified them slightly. The phone number in particular, I think. And if I click remove row and I close the application, it's going to ask me that same thing. And I run the application again. It works. The row is no longer there. I hit preferences. I hide the main toolbar. I hit close. Close. Yes, I'm sure. Run it. There's no more main toolbar and all that. So it works as expected. And you see how easy it was. You have an executable file that you can now distribute to whatever Windows machine you want, and it will work. There's no need to install, PySide separately. There's no need for the user to install Python. There's nothing. This is just a standard executable file. It contains all the libraries. With that being said, if I go to the PyDataMan folder, and if I select all this stuff that we have right here, even the compiled, even the UI files, everything, all the stuff that's not actually within this executable archive that we have right here, and I hit right click and I hit properties, you can see that the size on disk is 60 kilobytes. You go back here, you can see that it's 11 megabytes, nearly 12. The interesting culprit there is that PyInstaller has to embed all those libraries that the user will not have, such as PySide, logging, all that stuff that we have that we are doing, when we do import logging, import CSV, all that stuff needs to be contained within here so that the user has access to it even though he or she has not possibly installed Python. But here's an interesting thing I've noticed, however. That application that I've written that has over 40,000 lines of code, it's about 15 or 16 megabytes large. So, you have to import this basic stuff, which is big, like the Python DLL and all that. But then other libraries are not as great, and especially the source code being a text file, basically, they're not big. So, yeah, it's not going to be enormous in any case. And so yeah, look, there you have it. It's a fully functioning PyDataMan application that we have created using PyInstaller and through a very simple process. Now, of course, you may want to decide, well, I don't know, the name to be PyDataMan. That's fine. Just run this command again and just change whatever you want, and it's going to work just fine. One little trick I've noticed, or that I can give you guys, I've noticed when you compile it to windowed mode only, when you build it for windowed mode, especially when I was working on that big application of mine, it freezes a couple of times. It would run just fine, it would work just fine, and then it would suddenly freeze. It took me a while to figure out what was going on. See, I had a lot of print statements in my code, right? So I had a lot of print statements, and even though I'm not compiling for the console, I'm not building it for the console mode, the print statements are still sent to the standard output, which in Windows case would be command prompt generally, but it's called officially standard output. Now, standard output only has so much memory in order for it to buffer data, so you can't put zillion terabytes of it all of a sudden at once, and that buffer is fairly low because it expects the standard output to be displayed on the screen. Since it's not being displayed on the screen in this case, it's just keeps buffering and adding those print statements and adding those print statements, and suddenly there's no more room and the application freezes and it even crashes. The one way to go around it is to not build it as a windowed mode, build it as a console, and the standard output will be displayed and it'll work just fine. The other way to go about it is to remove all the print statements and use only logs. None of those were an option for me because I had too many print statements. But what I did was, interestingly enough, I redirected the standard output to a temporary file, which was deleted once the application has been exited. And I'm not going to explain how I did that in this video, but if you encounter that your application is freezing in the windowed mode only and it doesn't freeze in the console mode, that's probably the culprit. You're adding too many print statements. So yeah, you can Google redirect standard output to a temporary file Python, and the first result would probably be on Stack Overflow on how exactly to do it. And once again, like I said, we're done with this video, and thank you for watching, and stay tuned. The next video we're going to build an installation wizard so that you can distribute your application just as nicely as this executable, and even more nicely so that user can install it. Thank you.